everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Raya, this is rereads, and today we're going to be talking about the 15 books I read in July. 3 of them were nonfiction, 3 of them were young adult, and none of them were adult. And within those books, I have 2 romantasy, 2 fantasy, 2 romance, 4 literary fiction, and 2 thrillers. This was a good reading one for me, but a lot of the books are like 3.5 stars. I definitely had some good reads, and I have a new all-time favorite. So we're gonna get into it mostly chronologically. The first book I read was A Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lim, and this was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. And this takes place in the same world as the Six Crimson Cranes Spin the Dawn universe. So I loved Six Crimson Cranes last year, and I read all these. So I decided to pick this one up, and this one is so good. Our main girl, teenage girl True, finds herself in this Beauty and the Beast situation where she has to marry this guy in order to like save her family, and this guy is like a half dragon, half man, and it goes into like the dragon world from The Dragon's Promise. I just found this is really fun. I really like the main character, and I really liked her relationship with her family, and I like this world, and I like the underground water dragon setting. When they go in the dragon realm, they have this whole like plot about like political stuff, about like overthrowing the king and stuff like that, so that was fun too. But I didn't love the romance because the guy's a beast, you know, he's pretty secretive, and it's just kind of not my preferred vibe. But I did like the ending, so I thought it was refreshing and fantastical. Elizabeth Lim's books, all these characters, like, they go through whatever journey and plot, whatever. It's so stressful, but it's so fun at the same time, and I would definitely recommend this to anybody looking out for Beauty and the Beast retelling, or if you love this world, if you just love fantasy, because this is such a refreshing fantasy. The next book I read was A 7-Year Slip, and I've seen this book pretty much all over. It was on the best books of like 2023 list, and I actually have read Ashley Poston before. Once Upon a Con series, the Geekerella Princess and Pauper one, and then the Beauty and the Beast one, like the retellings of fairy tales in like a fangirl setting. I liked the first book of this series, Geekerella, and then the second book was like fine. I hated the third book. I was so mad at this book because it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it was just so bad. Like, there was no retelling aspect, there was no tension, like the characters were bad, the premise was bad, retelling elements sucked, and it wasn't even like the original Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. It was like for like the Disney movie, and it was, anyway, I was so mad. I know her romance books have been getting popular lately, so I tried this one to see if I like it, and it fell flat for me. I think the premise of this story is really fun. In 7-Year Slip, we follow Clementine, who is living in her aunt's apartment after she's recently passed away. And the thing about this apartment is that it sometimes just slips back in time 7 years or in the future. One day when she comes back to the apartment, she finds this guy that's just staying there for the summer with all of her aunt's things, and so she just kind of humors it because she wants to be in the presence of all of her aunt's things again. Maybe she falls in love along the way, but he's like 7 years back, and he's only there when she enters the apartment. This was just disappointing to me because it was pitched to me as like, oh, this is how relationships can change you from like 7 years. And 7 years is a long time. From when they first meet to when it's 7 years later, there should be like a big arc, there should be a change, and there really wasn't. She meets him in the present timeline, he's like the same guy. The guy was pretty much the same the entire time, and I will say I was worried about the 7-year age gap, but that's not really a thing. When they meet in like the past timeline, he's a little bit younger than her, and so when they meet in the present timeline, he's a little bit older than her, so that's fine, we're all good there. I liked their chemistry, I liked them as a couple, but the whole premise of the book is like the 7-year slip, and it's like I didn't really see much change within any of the characters. It's weird because like she would just kind of go back and forth between the past version of the guy and the present version of the guy, and they were interchangeable. She is not that good at communication, whatever, there's conflict, but he doesn't really get mad, he's not upset. He's like the perfect book boyfriend where he's just like there for the main character. I don't like books where the love interest is literally perfect. I just like reading about real people, so yeah, this just didn't really work for me, but I loved what the main character was going through with the grief of her aunt and to live after that and everything. So disappointing for me, but it's still fun. I made a playlist for this book on Spotify. So if you're interested while you're reading. The next book I read was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This book didn't really work for me either, and I feel bad because I'm pretty sure it's like part memoir, part fictional. There really wasn't any structure to this. It's like him like writing letters and like talking to his mother, who I don't think she could like read or write English or something like that. About the pain he feels as a child of a single parent immigrant in the US. And it was just sad vignettes back to back to back. It just kind of felt like I was reading his journal, which is not my preferred thing when I'm trying to read a novel. I didn't really learn anything. My preferred memoirs or nonfiction stuff is stuff that like addresses issues beyond personal stuff, and that didn't really happen. Like obviously it's his memoirs, so you can write about what he wants, but I already didn't feel connected to him, so I didn't even feel connected if this was like a bigger issue or anything. Next book I read was Defy the Night, and I had a good time with this book. Defy the Night is a fantasy, and we follow these two characters, and one of them is the prince and the advisor to the throne. So he's like the one making all the decisions, and he's like really stressed out because his kingdom is not doing well. And then there's like the sickness going around, and so our main girl is going around like at night trying to give like the cure to these people. I love the way these two storylines interact, and I called it from like chapter 1, and it was so fun. I was like screaming. I don't want to spoil or anything. I really like, I feel like you guys probably figured out in chapter 1 too. So a lot of the book is like about Korik and how like Tessa gets involved into Korik's world, but Tessa doesn't really have a plot of her own. I felt like her character was a little bit flat. Like she should have had more going on. I don't really like any kind of fantasy that like romanticizes royalty. In this one, he's a prince and he's like struggling already for his kingdom, but like even then it's like, oh, like I have to do this for my people, and I'm like, okay, like yeah, you better feel bad because you put yourself in this position because monarchy. This book kind of fills a lot of tropes, which I don't necessarily mind. I think the ending is a little bit cringy within the way that it like treats the kingdom. It doesn't really feel like a real place. We don't really explore a lot in the kingdom, so maybe that's something that it gets developed in future books, but I will not be continuing with the series just because it was kind of underwhelming, but I still had a good time, and I like this dynamic between the characters, and my favorite way it's done is in An Ember in the Ashes. If you like this, definitely read An Ember in the Ashes, because I just feel like there's more going on with those characters and the world, but I will say that the Ember in the Ashes is intense. Not necessarily the first book. I think you can read the first book and you'll be fine, but onwards. I would also recommend Mary E. Pearson's books, which I feel bad because these books literally do not work for me. I read The Kiss of Deception in like a couple hours because the writing style just did not work for me, but it has the coolest concept ever. It's about this princess that like runs away from getting married, and so you follow the princess, but also these two guys, and one of them is the assassin sent to kill her, and one of them is the prince that she's supposed to marry, and you don't know which is which, and that's like the coolest concept ever. And I really loved that, but I just couldn't with the writing. Is a me thing. I also tried Dance with this author, and it like I just couldn't understand what was going on because of the writing. From the premise, what I understood is that these two characters who are enemies, and they're in this forced proximity situation, they're enemies to lovers, and it's like betrayals, and even after like they get out of stuff, like it's still like betrayals. It seems fun. I also have a playlist for Defy the Night. The next book I read was the climate book, and I just randomly came across this, and I love Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg, get behind me. I love Greta Thunberg so much, and her resilience and her determination to spread knowledge to the world for whatever she believes in is so inspirational. And this is the climate book. I remember when Greta Thunberg was in the limelight in the media, when people thought she was inspirational and she was a child, and she really fought back on that, and then she discovered that like capitalism was basically the root of all evil, and then they stopped showing her and everything. This book is a collection of essays of like why we need to fix climate now, because it goes into like literally pretty much everything you could think of like who specifically it's hurting, why this is happening, who's in charge of this, and what we can do. There's like the last part of the book is like what you can do personally, what we should be expecting for world leaders and stuff like this. The main thing about this book is that like I already believe in the climate issue. I don't know who this book is for. I don't know if a book full of essays was the best way to get this message out. Obviously, if they knew what the best way to get the message was out, like this climate change wouldn't even be a problem because everybody would already be on the same side. I obviously recommend this to everybody because climate change is an issue and it's happening and it's been having consequences and it's going to continue to have consequences if we don't do something about it now. I just feel like new people wouldn't read this. It's like only the people who are already interested in climate change and reading essays are reading this. So I feel like it should have tried to target a more general audience because, let's be honest, most people don't really care about facts and science. They care about how it affects them. The next book I read is Happiness Falls. Happiness Falls takes place in 2020 during the pandemic, and we follow our main adult girl who's home from college, and her dad and her younger brother, who is disabled, go on a walk, and then but only the brother comes back and the dad is missing, and they're trying to figure out what happened to him. And it was a unique premise, and it's very emotional, and I was surprised at the way that this all played out. The conversation with the disabled younger brother, how they treat him, how they wouldn't treat him, was done really well, and it was very interesting. The main character was just like so childish. Next book I read was The Leftover Women, and I'm also going to talk about Little Fires Everywhere. The Leftover Women follows these two mothers, and one is the biological mother of this Chinese baby, and she's come from China to try to find her baby that's been sold. The other mother is the white woman that adopted this baby and is living in like this affluent neighborhood in New York. We follow this like journey as the Chinese woman is trying to get her daughter back and is in this like sketchy club trying to like get money to get her daughter back. I liked that perspective and I learned a lot from her experience because she got married young in China, and then because of the one-child policy, her husband forced her to give up her baby because they wanted a son. She thought that the baby died, but now she's like in America trying to look for it because it got sold to this white couple, and she's like trying to get it back. The question we all wonder is like, who is gonna give his baby a better life, because this mom is like struggling and everything. I really love the setup for this. There's a twist in the middle that's really good and it's really well developed. But the ending was so bad. The ending, they're just like so simple. It's just like, okay, like it was just so black and white what the right answer was, and it was like, I feel like there's more nuance here. Like it was just honestly really frustrating. It probably could have been solved by a conversation based off the way the ending went. This is not chronological, but later in this month I read Little Fires Everywhere, which is a better analysis on this same premise, even though what happens in this book is like a side plot in Little Fires Everywhere. In Little Fires Everywhere we follow this rich white family in like suburban Ohio, and we follow like this mom character who has like the perfect life, perfect kids, and she rents out this apartment to this single mother and her daughter, and these families just intermix because the daughter is like now friends with all of her kids. It's about classism, privilege, but also about motherhood. In this book there's a side character who is adopting a Chinese baby, and all of a sudden the birth mom comes back, and so there's this custody battle between the parents, and it's a really interesting deep dive. And what I wanted from The Leftover Woman, who can provide this baby a better life, what are the conditions for motherhood. I love the exploration of like perfect nuclear families and like breaking it down and seeing like this family that we thought was perfect but it isn't. I had a really good time with this book, and I think the ending was a little bit underwhelming for how many plot points there are in the book, but it was still good. After I read this, I watched a TV show, and I think the TV show is better for basically one main reason. In the book there's no specific race for what the single mother and her child are, but in the TV show they are black, and that just adds so much more complexity into this suburban town with this classism issue, because now there's also like a racism issue. I was thinking about doing an entire video on this, but I think I can just sum it up. Like the TV show is better. Next book I read is because of a reading slump, so I really wanted to read romance. I decided to read one of my favorite romances, Divine Rivals. Men and Irish are just doing it like no other, and this was one of my favorite books of 2023, The Definition of Romance. And Divine Rivals takes place in this fantasy world, but our two main characters are human. There's a war that's going on in the background, and they are currently rivals in their newspaper or something, and the main girl, Iris, she is writing letters to somebody and she's slipping them under her wardrobe, and she's not planning on like getting a response, but somehow somebody keeps responding. Who is it? What if it's her workplace rival? I just love the development between Roman and Iris so much. Like, they really are like the enemies to lovers, the rich guy poor girl trope. She inspires him to make decisions because he's controlled by his dad. Roman Kit, like, I love this man. Yeah, a little bit of world building in Divine Rivals that's supposed to be expanded on in the sequel, but that's just not what happens. And then there's just like plot holes. It's really messy. Nah. So when I was reading this, I really did not pay attention to any of the fantasy stuff. I just focused on Roman and Iris, but they are just my everything, and they are what makes me believe in romance, and we all need that sometimes. And I do have my playlist for Divine Rivals, and the song I connect them with is Timeless by Taylor Swift. The next book I read is All the Sinners Bleed. This book didn't work for me, but I would like to say that I'm not really a thriller mystery person, so take this rating with a grain of salt, because I don't like true crime. The book is about this newly elected black sheriff who is looking into this serial killer case in this like town. It's hard for me to care about mysteries when there isn't any kind of personal stakes in the mystery. Like, it's just sheriff. Like, I'm just reading about somebody doing their job, and it's just not that interesting to me because I don't like true crime, and I just have to skip a lot of scenes because there was like gore. So I wasn't that compelled by any of the characters or narratives. I think this is becoming a TV show series, and I might watch it. I don't know. I liked the reveal of the serial killer and how it affected black communities and how and what kind of people it preyed on, and that like commentary in society. But overall, the tension really just didn't work for me. So unfortunately, yeah, I just didn't really vibe with this book. The next thriller I read was None of This Is True. And this book was like one of the best books of Booktube's 2024. I've only heard good things about this, so I was so seated. And this is about two middle-aged women. One of them is Josie, and she's just kind of like a housewife. She has a job, but she is like trying to do more with her life. And then the other woman is Alex, and she's a podcaster, and they happen to have the same birthday. They meet, and then they just meet up after that. I liked the first part of this book where we're building up to this tension, building up to this reveal, and I feel like I like it because I gave this book so much more credit than what it deserves. You have to go in with the right expectations, or this book is just gonna be so disappointing for you. A really cool thing about this book is that there's also this podcast element. You can even listen to the podcast on Spotify. You have these elements in the book where it's literally just these podcast recordings. And so for my interpretation, you know that like those are true because it's like audio recording. You can hear it, you can see it. Maybe it's been edited, but like for the most part, what they're saying in the podcast is true. And like whatever else is around it, you don't know if that's true or not. That could be false. So I thought the podcast element added a lot to it. And then there's also this Netflix documentary that's attached to it as well. It honestly didn't add much, except for it added some of the side characters' perspective, and it just amped up the tension. And it was like, oh, you won't believe what happened here. Such a good premise, such a good setup, and the end result is just a crazy woman. And I could be like fun with this. I could be like, oh, you don't know who the crazy woman is, but like no, there's only one crazy woman, and it's very clear who it is from the start. There's no twist. I don't read a lot of mystery thriller, and if I can come with a better twist than this, then this book is bad. I'm gonna get into spoilers now. So the first thing I want to discuss is Josie and her husband, which is actually crazy because she married a 42-year-old when she was like 16, and everybody was like, oh my god, like that's a pedophile, and she is like coming to terms with that herself. Josie's like the crazy woman. She's the one behind all of this, all the crazy stuff. There's some characters in the book that specifically say that it's Josie's fault for getting into a marriage with a pedophile. And a lot of people think that's like the book stance on that. And I don't believe that that's the book stance on that, because the only characters that say that are the characters that we already don't like. So I don't think the book is saying that. Either way, it's so weird and it's not dealt with in a way that I like. The podcaster, Alex, I thought she was gonna be crazy. Like, I thought the entire twist of this book is gonna be like she killed her husband, but then she like blamed it on Josie. I thought there was gonna be this whole intricate thing about how Alex was the one that was stalking Josie, and how she planned it all along, and she like set up the crumbs. But like Alex is a normal woman. And they're just so disappointing in a thriller. There should be no normal people. Everybody should be at fault. I was hoping that the Netflix documentary, I was hoping we'd get scenes from that, and that would show how dramatized this relationship was. I feel like you could have done something with the media and how it'd be like, oh, like it wasn't that bad, but then like the media like spun it into something bigger, and then like that had consequences of its own. I wouldn't even call these plot twists. Like they're just reveals, but they're not satisfying. The next book I read is The Witch's Heart, and this was a book I wanted to read a couple years ago, and then I returned it to the library before I got into it. And so I read it now, and I had a good time with this. It's about, I think her name is Angrboda, but she is Loki's wife in Norse mythology. That's all I'm gonna say, because I didn't know anything about Angrboda before I read this. The Norse mythology knowledge I have comes from Magnus Chase, and I most recently read it 2 years ago, so I knew a little bit about it. I really enjoyed like how I didn't know anything about this character before I started the book, and I would recommend you do that too if you have any knowledge about Norse mythology, because it's kind of just fun to see how she plays into all of this. And I read Circe a few years ago and I remember nothing about it, but apparently I really loved it when I first read it, so I can't really give similarities. I suppose it's similar because it's a feminist take on a woman's role in these mythologies. The motherhood theme is strong in this one too, because she loses her children and it's about her getting them back. And I think the tension in this book is really good too, because you're leading up to Ragnarok, which is like the end of the world in Norse mythology. You're trying to like figure out all this stuff before the end of the world. The first part of the book is her meeting Loki, and it really just felt like fan fiction. It felt like YM, like, oh my god, like Loki shows up at your doorstep, like what do you do? The setting with all the gods and her relationship with all the gods is really cool. There's this one specific relationship that she has that I really love the way that played out, but I'm not gonna spoil it. The next book I read was The House of My Mother by Sherry Frank. This is a child who was a victim of the parenting child vlog thing on YouTube, and I knew like very little about 8 Passengers before I started this. I honestly don't know what kind of people really watch family vlogging channels. It's never been an interest to me, and I've kind of gone like the exploitation of family vloggers rabbit hole a couple times. I almost watched the documentary of this, but I heard some mixed things about it, and I also wanted to read this book anyway to get her perspective. So I love this. Like, it was so good. Her writing is so good. I feel bad. A lot of it is just like really sad, and her trauma being poured out. She just writes so beautifully and explains her pain in such a great way, and it really makes me feel for all the kids that have been in this scenario. To give the premise, I think 8 Passengers was a family YouTube channel that was started by the mom, and she started like filming her kids doing like random stuff in the house. She became like a parenting influencer. I don't know how to describe this because I literally don't know anything about the family vlogging landscape. It's just so insane to me that this is even a thing. What ended up happening is that the mom was like abusive this entire time. The internet only caught on during this like last act, and the police had ended up getting involved and everything. But it's like, how did we let abusive moms film their children for YouTube and say nothing about it? I really love that this is a novel too, because it's her words, her perspective, and even in like documentaries they have to like blur out a lot of the footage because they don't want to further exploit the children, but it's literally her writing her story. And I really appreciate that she doesn't really mention her younger siblings by name, and she doesn't even explain like the whole extent of what was happening to them because she doesn't want to further exploit their trauma, and that is just so respectful. She's sharing her story. She's giving permission for herself to exist in this landscape that where she was never given a choice. Now that's her words. This book really does a good job of explaining how popular 8 Passenger was. I feel like in a celebrity memoir sometimes they forget that not everybody knows who they are, but this one did like a really good job describing of like, oh, I was 6 and we had 8,000 followers, and like now I'm 16, we have 8 million. Like, those are random numbers. I've kind of gone down the child exploitation rabbit hole now because it's just crazy that these children are working essentially for like every day, and there's no money that's set aside for them. There's no limit for how many hours they can work, and these parents are really just having children and filming their lives, and they just don't get any of it. Like, it's just a weird balance between parenting, but you're also making money off your kid. We see now here that Sherry Frank is rewarded for exploiting her children and getting millions of views. Obviously, like, she is attracted to YouTube because of this behavior, and I never really thought about this in creators before. I used to think that YouTubers or representation of the world, or people on social media were a representation of the world, but I've come to realize that, like, they're not. I grew up in a time where I really looked up to influencers, and I thought their perspective was like what is actually real. It's like kind of outside my niche as a booktube channel, but I would love to talk about like how influencer culture is becoming the new like Disney Channel. Like, now kids are like watching family channels or just people live their life. The thing about being influenced by like a real person is that there's nobody really keeping them in check because they're already being rewarded for the behavior for posting about these things in the first place. I feel like I'm explaining this badly. Obviously, this is like opening up a conversation in my mind, which is what memoirs should do. The next book I read was Endling. I didn't really get into this book, honestly. The first time was fine, and then something happens in the middle part, which is like very, very intriguing. I love that. And then the second half lost me. So we follow these two characters in Ukraine. One of them is like a snail scientist, and the other one is like the daughter of this like feminist activist. They're both in the wedding industry, not wedding, partner industry in Ukraine, where they like match up a Ukrainian girl with like an outsider, and they're both in it for different reasons. Then we follow them as they like kidnap some of the guys in the program to kind of like make a stand for themselves, but then all of a sudden Ukraine gets invaded by Russia, and that's the middle portion of the book talks about, can this be a story about Ukraine without it being about the war, and should we like make this about the war, or is that just feeding off narratives and feeding off stereotypes? And I really love that conversation. The last half of the book lost me. Like, I had no idea what was going on. The premise is cool and the whole idea of it is cool, but it just didn't really work for me, unfortunately. The last book I read is A Truth According to Ember, which is the first rom-com featuring Indigenous people, which is absolutely crazy that it's taken this long. But I unfortunately was kind of disappointed by this, but mostly because the love interest is perfect, and I hate it when books do that. We follow Ember. She's looking for a job, and she usually checks off Native American when she's applying to jobs, but this time she decided to try white and see if that would get her a job, and she ends up landing her, like, her dream job, dream benefits, dream scenario. In her job, she doesn't really know and do everything, so she like has like little white lies. She's like, oh, like, yeah, I can do this. That's how like her lying starts, and then she ends up like lying about like really random things to her crush, the guy. She just ends up lying about like so many random things, and it just kind of felt like a Disney Channel premise. Like, it just kind of felt like a little bit juvenile for her age. All in all, it was a fun premise, but just the stuff she lied about was so stupid. And then her and the love interest like each other right away, and they get together like middle of the book or something. And the only tension is that it's a workplace romance. You don't want to talk about it because it's gonna like mess up the workplace. Have a conversation, talk to HR. The main girl was like a mess, but like, you know, I love that representation of a mess. It just, the guy was perfect, and I couldn't. And I loved the main character's like best friend, and like the family energy, and like the workplace stuff was like interesting. I've never read a workplace romance. That has been our wrap up for July. Please let me know what you guys thought about these books and what books you read in July. That's gonna be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Instagram. Thank you. Bye.